హలో వ్యూవర్స్, మనం టీజీపీఎస్సీ జనరల్ ఎస్సే సిరీస్లో భాగంగా ముందు సెషన్స్లో కొన్ని ఎస్సేస్ చేశాము. సో ముందు సెషన్స్లో వీ హ్యావ్ డిస్కస్డ్ టూ మోడల్ ఎస్సేస్ అండర్ కాంటెంపరీ సోషల్ ఇష్యూస్ అండ్ సోషల్ ఛాలెంజెస్లో ఒక 2 మోడల్ ఎస్సేస్ చూసాము. ఇష్యూస్ ఆఫ్ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ జస్టిస్లో ఒక మోడల్ ఎస్సే చూసాము. దాని కంటిన్యూషన్లోనే ఈరోజు ఇన్ దిస్ సెషన్ విల్ సీ ఇష్యూస్ ఆఫ్ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ జస్టిస్లో ఒక మోడల్ ఎస్సే తీసుకుందాము. దట్ ఈస్ హౌ కెన్ బ్యాలెన్స్డ్ పాలసీస్ ఎన్ష్యూర్ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్, సోషల్ ఇంక్లూషన్ అండ్ ఎన్విరాన్మెంటల్ జస్టిస్ కెన్ కోఎగ్జిస్ట్ ఇన్ సస్టైనబుల్ డెవలప్మెంట్. ఫస్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ అర్థం చేసుకోండి. సో ఇక్కడ ఏమంటున్నాడు, హౌ క్యాన్ బ్యాలెన్స్డ్ పాలసీస్ ensure 3 things, that is your economic growth, social inclusion and environmental justice or environmental protection, eventually leading to sustainable development. So ఇది కూడా ముందు ఎస్సే లాంటిదే, కానీ దీంట్లో we are talking more about how can the balanced policies ensure economic growth. We need to maintain economic growth. Also, we need to maintain social inclusion, and then eventually we also need to ensure environmental justice, eventually ensuring sustainable development. So first దీనిలో కొన్ని కాన్సెప్ట్స్ ఉన్నాయో అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికి ట్రై చేద్దాం. సో వాట్ ఈస్ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్, వాట్ ఈస్ సోషల్ ఇంక్లూషన్, వాట్ ఈస్ environmental justice, eventually what is sustainable development. If you take sustainable development, what is sustainable development? Sustainable development is a development which ensures that it provides the needs of the present generation without affecting the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. So manaki mana avasaralu fulfill avvali, at the same time we should not affect the future generations to meet their needs. So that is your sustainable development. Environmental justice, to ensure that environment is protected, preserved, conserved. And then social inclusion. ముందు సెషన్లో we have discussed what is social inclusion, social justice, social equality or social equity. Okay, so equity is about ensuring that justice, fairness, equal distribution of resources, privileges, powers in the society to every section of the society. That is equity. So then what is economic growth? Increasing your wealth creation, GDP development, etc. is your economic growth. But only balanced policies can give you all 3 of them together. If your policies are not balanced, what happens? Either one of them will dominate the other, eventually creating problem for the sustainable development. So manam chuddam how balanced policies at the central government level, at the state government level have been assuring us, have been providing us with economic growth, social inclusion and environmental justice. So you can start with an introduction. You can take and basically introduction. The purpose of introduction is to give you a glimpse of the essay, give you how this essay is going to take the directions. That is the purpose, and you need to explain that in the introduction by basically defining what are the basic terms and then giving a perspective of your essay. And then you can use some quotes. See, this is basically called as thesis statement. You can say that in this essay we will examine how balanced policies can promote inclusive economic growth while safeguarding the environment and ensuring justice for all. So you are just basically telling the reader, the evaluator, that this essay will focus on how your balanced policies will ensure all 3 of them together, eventually leading to sustainable development. So we'll see economic growth and its impact on society and environment. Economic growth is essential for creating jobs, raising living standards and reducing poverty. Basically the role, see, this is a basic introduction of economic growth that I have discussed. You can see that. And then second, green growth and environmental justice. Basically try to understand, we have both central government will take some certain policies and central government will also take certain policies. Now we have to see what are these balanced policies at central government, at state government, in regard to economic growth, social inclusion and environment. If you try to look at, these are some of the policies by the central government. See, we'll see some of the policies by central government in regard to economic growth. So if you try to understand what are the different policies that central government is trying to bring in regard to economic growth, so you will get to understand central government is focusing on different policies, like for example, Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, National Infrastructure Policy, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. Like these different policies are being brought in by the central government to promote economic growth. At the same time, if you try to understand what are the different policies taken by the state government in regard to this economic development. So you need to see, this essay is basically asking what are the balanced economic policies will ensure these three things. So these are some of the examples of policies of economic growth at central level. Let's see at state level, at Telangana, what are the different policies taken by the Telangana government in regard to achieving economic growth. You will see that we have in our industrial policy, we have brought in TS iPass, T-Hub. We are providing so many incentives to attract the investments, and we are also focusing on something like information technology investment region. So like this, we are focusing even on national investment and manufacturing zones at Zahirabad. So different policies are being undertaken at the state level and the central level to promote economic growth. So this is in regard to the first aspect, that is how the central government and the state government are taking different policies to promote economic growth. So after you understand this, then is it the only case that the central government and state governments are focusing on the economic growth itself, or they are also trying to promote environmental protection and conservation and social inclusion? Understand this. If the government at center and the government at state are focusing only on economic growth by neglecting environmental protection and social inclusion, eventually this may not become sustainable. So our target is to ensure sustainable development. But how can sustainable development happen? It will not happen if we focus only on economic growth. At the same time, when we are focusing on economic growth, we should also aim at protecting environment and also ensuring justice, inclusion, inclusive growth, and so on. So let's see what are the different policies by the central government and the state government in regard to environmental protection. This is one of the policies by the Telangana government to increase the forest area from around 24% to 33%. So in that context, let's try to understand what are the different policies by the central government and the state government. So if you take central government, let's try to understand what are the different policies that central government is trying to implement or take to ensure environmental protection. You will know that there is National Action Plan on Climate Change, under which 8 sub-plans were there regarding promotion of solar energy, urban development, sustainable urban development, wetlands conservation, etc., etc. So you have National Action Plan on Climate Change, and then you have National Biodiversity Action Plan. Then you have other schemes like eco-sensitive zones, ecological sensitive zones. Then you have coastal regulation zones. So these are few policies taken by the central government in regard to ensuring protection, preservation, conservation of environment. But there are n number of schemes and policies, legislations to protect environment. In regard to wildlife, you have Wildlife Protection Act, you have wildlife conservation areas, you have national parks where we are trying to conserve the wildlife. In regard to wetlands, we have wetland conservation programs. We are part of Ramsar Convention where we are trying to promote wetlands preservation, conservation, even river water, other lake conservation, river protection, pollution, reduction of pollution in rivers. So there are n number of policies taken by the central government to protect, preserve and conserve environment. So this is the balanced approach in regard to environment at the central government. Let's try to understand at the state government also. We are trying to ensure environmental protection. First is Haritaharam, where we are aiming to increase the forest cover from 24% to 33%. Then you have Mission Kakatiya, where we are trying to protect our tanks. Okay. Then you have state solar energy policy, where we are trying to increase the energy mix by bringing solar energy into the overall energy. Like this, even at the state government, we are also promoting ecotourism. Recent government is also focusing in regard to promoting ecotourism. So like this, at the state government also we are trying to have a balanced approach in regard to protection of environment. So we have seen how the central government and state government has tried or has brought in different policies to promote economic growth at center and state level. Then we have seen what are the different policies by the central government and the state government in regard to promoting, preserving, conserving environment. Then we'll see what are the different policies in regard to social inclusion. Social inclusion కోసం సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్లో, స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్లో డిఫరెంట్ పాలసీస్ ఏమేమి తీసుకున్నాము. సో అట్ సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్ లెవెల్ యూ హ్యావ్ ఎన్ నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ పాలసీస్ టు ప్రమోట్ సోషల్ ఇంక్లూషన్, స్టార్టింగ్ విత్ ఎంజీ నరేగా, ప్రధాన్ మంత్రి ఆవాస్ యోజన, ఇందిరా గాంధీ నేషనల్ పెన్షన్ స్కీమ్, ప్రధాన్ మంత్రి ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ గ్యారంటీ ప్రోగ్రామ్, స్కిల్ డెవలప్మెంట్ ప్రోగ్రామ్. So different mechanisms, rural development, poverty reduction programs. So there are a number of policies that are being undertaken to ensure that our economic growth also ensures social inclusion, also promotes inclusive growth, eventually leading to promotion of justice, promotion of equity, and so on. Even you can talk about the reservation policies at the central government level, policies in regard to the marginalized sections like disabled, women, SCs, STs. So n number of policies are being brought in by the central government to promote social inclusion, social justice, equity, and so on, so that our growth is not centralized in few hands, or our growth is not depriving certain sections and taking everyone in the process. So that is the social inclusion from the central government. If you try to understand what is the state government, what is state government trying to do in regard to social inclusion, state government level lo Telangana government social inclusion kosam em chestundi chuddam. So in this regard, if you see the earlier governments and the present governments, you can see number of schemes and policies being undertaken to promote social inclusion. For example, Asara pensions, earlier government Raitu Bandhu, now it is Raitu Bharosa, Abhay Hastam. Then you have 2 BHK scheme, then you have giving 3 acres of land to landless SC families. So like this, you can see pensions, health, Arogyasri, and even in education we are ensuring that midday meal scheme, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, etc. are being implemented by the state government. So if you look at these different policies like Asara pensions, Raitu Bharosa, Raitu Bandhu, Raitu Beemu, Abhay Hastam, 2 BHK houses giving 3 acres to landless, poor, SC families, Arogyasri Health Initiative, and so on. So even at the state government, we are not just focusing on economic growth, only trying to promote growth and development by neglecting the vulnerable sections, deprived sections. Okay, that is not the case. Even at the state government level, we are also aiming to ensure that the development is balanced, growth is balanced, growth becomes inclusive. So after understanding all this, you will get to understand that only when you balance the economic growth or balance the economic development by social inclusion and environmental justice, only then eventually you will have sustainable development. So if you really want to have sustainable development, which is resilient, which is long lasting, then you need to balance your economic growth with social inclusion policies, with environmental justice policies. Eventually this will lead to sustainable development. So in this topic called issues of economic growth and justice, you need to understand the relation and the dynamics between economic growth and justice. In our earlier sessions, we have seen how economic prosperity without social justice is meaningless, and social justice is not possible without economic prosperity అనేది చూసాము. So in this session we have seen how balanced policies, that is the role played by the government at center and state level in regard to balancing economic growth, social inclusion and environmental justice, can eventually help us in realizing sustainable development. So mostly these are the ways how questions can come in this topic. So this is a conclusion, but see, eventually try to understand in this topic called economic growth and justice, you need to understand the what is growth, what is the relation between growth and development, and then understand relation to justice. Justice can be in general, or you can understand justice from social perspective, economic perspective, political perspective, and other perspectives. Like basically justice can be understood as fairness. So in this aspect, try to decode this topic called economic growth and social justice. So ఈ కాంటెక్స్ట్లో మనకి కొంతమంది స్టూడెంట్స్ అసలు ఈ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ జస్టిస్ మీద కొంచెం డౌట్స్ ఉన్నాయి, కొంచెం క్లారిఫై చేయండి అని డౌట్స్ రేజ్ చేశారు, కామెంట్స్ చేశారు. సో ఆ కాంటెక్స్ట్లో మనం అసలు ఈ సెకండ్ టాపిక్, దట్ ఈస్ ఇష్యూస్ ఆఫ్ ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అండ్ జస్టిస్ అనే టాపిక్ని అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికి ట్రై చేద్దాం. సో అసలు ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ అంటే ఏంటి, దానికి డెవలప్మెంట్కి రిలేషన్ ఏంటి, అండ్ దెన్ ఈ రెండింటికి జస్టిస్ అనే కాన్సెప్ట్కి రిలేషన్ ఏంటిది, అసలు జస్టిస్ అంటే ఏంటి అనేది కొంచెం అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికి ట్రై చేద్దాం. చూడండి, ఎకనామిక్ గ్రోత్ ఆర్ జస్ట్ గ్రోత్ ఇన్ జనరల్ వర్సెస్ డెవలప్మెంట్ is two different things. Growth is basically quantitative, numbers based. Growth will give you a quantitative perspective on economic development or economic growth, whereas development is quantitative. So growth is quantitative, development is qualitative. Growth is measured by your GDP, whereas your development is measured by your human development indices. Just growth in itself may not give you development. There is jobless growth also, generally, which is related to India's growth story, Sometimes we refer India's growth as jobless growth. We are seeing growth, but there is no job creation. If it is a jobless growth, then it may not help us in development process. What is development? Development is about people. Development is giving better standard of lives. So when you give or promote better standard of living, that is development. So growth may not give you better standard of living. In this context, sometimes we use two models of development, that is Gujarat model of development versus Kerala model of development, where Gujarat has better numbers in regard to growth, but when you take the human development indices, whether it is literacy, nutrition, etc., education, etc., Kerala is better compared to Gujarat. So you can say Kerala is developed, but Gujarat has growth. In Gujarat, you don't see as good as the human development indices in Kerala. Kerala may not be good in regard to, Kerala may not be as good as Gujarat in regard to growth, but it has better developmental indices. So understand this relation between growth and development. They both are generally used as synonymously, but they are not same. So this is your relation between the growth and development. Development is sustainable, it's long, it helps us in long term, but growth may not help us in long term. So this is your growth versus development. Let's understand what is justice in short. Justice in short can be referred to as fairness, giving what is due to the people. So in regard to justice, you need to understand there are different philosophers and thinkers who have given different concepts in regard to justice. There are theories regarding procedural justice versus distributive justice or substantive justice. So procedural justice is about justice only in the process, in the procedure, but whereas distributive justice is realizing this procedure and ensuring that the benefits reach the poor. So this is distributive versus procedural. And understand Amartya Sen concept of justice. Amartya Sen says that justice should be substantial. It should not only be procedural. How to ensure this substantial justice? According to Amartya Sen, Amartya Sen says that for us to realize this substantial justice, we need to focus on enabling or giving capabilities. When you provide these capabilities to the people, capabilities approach, this is called as capabilities approach of Amartya Sen. When you provide these capabilities to the people, then it eventually leads to ensuring justice. What do you understand by this ensuring capabilities? It is basically giving them, when you provide these things, education, skills, health, etc., people will develop their capabilities and use and develop their freedoms. So it is, justice is about enabling or increasing the freedoms of common people. When you provide them with education, skills, health, then it eventually enlarges the freedoms that are available to the people. So this is about justice. So understand growth, development, justice, and the relation between these three concepts. So under this second concepts of economic growth and justice, question can be asked by interrelating these three terms: economic growth, justice, and in regard to justice, they may talk about inclusive growth, social inclusion. Try to understand the relation between these terms: economic growth, justice, inclusive growth, social inclusion, and environmental justice. When you get to understand the relation, interdependence, and the interaction between these three things, these few things, and eventually they can even give the aspect of women empowerment also in this essay, but this may be covered in the ఎర్లియర్ టాపిక్స్ కాంటెంపరీ సోషల్ ఇష్యూస్ అండ్ సోషల్ ఛాలెంజెస్లో కవర్ చేయడానికి మోర్ ప్రాబబిలిటీ ఉంటుంది. అందుకని చెప్పి దీనిలో మనం డిస్కస్ చేయట్లేదు. బట్ ఈవెన్ ఉమెన్ ఎంపవర్మెంట్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో అన్ ఆస్పెక్ట్ ఆఫ్ జస్టిస్. సో ఇవన్నీ ప్రాపర్గా అర్థం చేసుకొని కొంచెం ప్రిపేర్ అయి ఉంటే మీరు ఎక్స్పెక్టెడ్ టాపిక్కి ఈజీగా మంచిగా ఆన్సర్ రాయడానికి, ఎస్సే రాయడానికి పాసిబిలిటీ ఉంటుంది. థ్యాంక్ యూ వ్యూవర్స్.